What's up, guys? Adam here again with RVA Returns, back at you with another set review. So this time we're going to be going over Lightning. So I brought in our local Lightning expert, per se, to review the Lightning cards with me. So we have Matt Jordan.
Hey, how y'all doing today? We're going to be looking at some very interesting cards. I wouldn't say Lightning got Lightning got some new tricks, a few staples, and support that will help out a lot of decks. So looking forward to looking at the.
Yeah, so we'll kick it off with the first card. So the first card is a new Red Mage, 2 cost backup. For 2 colorless and tap, you can choose a forward of 1,000, deal at 1,000, and if it's active, it deals at 2. What do you think about this one?
So the first thing when I think of this card is I know I don't remember the Opus, but there's already a card that exists, Ninja, that if you just pay 2 lightning, it will always deal 2k. Whereas this, it only deals 1k, and then to an active, it deals 2k. But the difference is that I believe this one deals colorless cost 2,
Yep.
which means I guess if you want to be cute and play the lightning fire red mage, you can try this. But overall, I can't see that this card being the meta at all.
Yeah, and maybe just a stack on top of that, like maybe if like a Wind Lightning deck or something, since you might not have lightning, like always have lightning mana at that go. But other than that, yeah, I don't think this quite makes the cut unless you're playing like that red mage centric deck.
Yep.
So next card we have is Assassin. It's one of the new Final Fantasy Advanced 2 characters. It's a 2 cost with haste, 2k power, and when it attacks, choose one forward, cost 2 or less, dull it.
I like this card. Its power is irrelevant because you don't really care. It's a 2k standard unit with haste, so you start to think of maybe 2-drop Golbez probably replaces the attacking ninja there just because it has haste, and then chances are if something does have a 2-drop or less, they could dull it. So maybe you're up against stuff like Lednar, Gogo, Yida, or other standard units, it can just swing through. It is a Tactics Advance 2 card, which means it is tutorable by a card we'll see later in this set. The only thing I do want to talk about this card is it is a forced trigger of saying you have to choose a cost of 2 or less, but it's not too bad in this case because when Assassin attacks, you just choose itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even though it's forced, you always can just choose itself because it costs 2. But it can be like really annoying. Like if you have a 2 drop out that you're really looking to block, and now this just dulls it away. Lednar is a big one I can think of off the top of my head that this deals with pretty well. Other than that, yeah, I think like within Golbez, I think it's really good. And if you're running some kind of Tactics Advance too, just to throw it in another slot and maybe hit something else with Alcid. But again,
I,
I think it's really strong in Golbez mostly.
I think it's strong in Golbez, and then I think if you try Wind Lightning Tactics Advance 2, it merits a slot just because I've seen a board where you have Cobalt Droid out, which means only 2 or less can block. And then with this is out, guess what? That 2-drop isn't blocking Cobalt Droid. So I don't know. There's things.
Yep.
It's gonna see play. How much play depends on the deck.
Sure. And speaking of seeing play, we'll get to the next card, which I think is going to see a ton of play. 3 costs, Alua. Another Tactics Advance 2 character. She has haste. Basically, her first ability is when she gets chosen for the first time, cancel the effect. And then her S is just an S. Activate all forwards you control, give them haste, and then your opponent's forwards lose 2,000 power until end of turn.
All right. Well, before I even begin with this card, pretty much you saw this, you're like, all right, this is Alcid's girlfriend. Like we just plug this in. You're a 3-drop, you have haste, and not even going into the S ability yet, because we'll get there. It's a card that has protection, which in Lightning Element doesn't really protect itself well. Probably before this, Hildebrand was the only thing that really had some type of self-preservation, and that was just kind of going back to your hand. It didn't really protect itself while it was on the field. So, and then it also will negate abilities. So, say they have to choose 2 or something, your other card is now safe if it had to target a Lua. And then that S ability, jeez, that might be one of the best S's just for pure value that I've seen right now. Like there are so many lines that you have potentially with this. You have 2K power reduction across the board. You get to reactivate everything. Everything has haste. So imagine now you have turns where you could have Amon dull something. You activate this S, Amon is active again. Like there are so many plays that this S ability can trigger, and it can help you win combats. I Anything else you really want to add to this?
I think that's pretty much everything. It's insane. One thing to note is her second ability, or I guess the first like ability is an auto. So EX bursts will hit her. She'll attempt to cancel, but because EX bursts don't stack, she'll still die to those. But it will consume or cancel too, as well. If it's just like some random thing that you just want to use to burn her first ability, you can also use your own abilities to burn her first ability to try to then kill her. The thing is, you're still expending extra mana to get rid of this card, which is what makes it really, really good. And then its S is just crazy. So
Yeah, like I think this card, like when you're playing this on like turn 2 or turn 3, like when they're trying to set up, this card is amazing just because they have to either deal with it in combat, which then it's already swung with haste and it's done its job and it's gonna be out there, or it's just a problem to deal with.
yeah, so you're gonna see a ton of play, obviously. Crazy good card. So next card is the new Odin. It's 3 costs. Select one of 2. Choose a forward. 3 or less, break it. Choose a monster. 3 or less, break it.
Well, it has flexibility. I just don't know how much C it plays just because we'll just go over. Forwards are 3 or less. You have other forms of removal in Lightning, like you already have 4-drop Odin, you have Exodus, Raiden, you have better removal in this. And then monsters, the new ones it may hit like Hill Gigas, like Death Gaze, and then Death Black Knight, which some of those cards we've either talked about or we'll talk about later. But then a lot of the other monsters, they get to just trigger something when you respond to them. So it's not like you're getting the full value out of this card. And then some of the really big monsters that have just been introduced in this Opus 5 set, you're still not hitting. So I don't think this sees much play just because there's just it there is no slot for this card right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if I was gonna run an Odin, I would either be running the 7 or the 4 for sure. And I don't know how this ever squeaks in a spot. I mean, maybe if some monsters get out of control and you need some extra removal, but if that's the case, I feel like Ramu is better, cheaper removal, even though Ramu doesn't hit everything this hits.
Ramu is a burst though, right?
Yeah, Ramu is a burst and this is not. Which I feel like this could have been fine as a burst. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it would have had to have cost 4 or something. But yeah, I think it's gonna be hard, like you said, to find spots in decks. So I don't think it's gonna see much play at all. Next we have another Odin. It's Twilight Odin. He's a monster. Costs 4. 13 character, so he triggers lightning. For 1 lightning until end of turn, he becomes a forward, 7k power. When he deals damage to your opponent, you choose a forward opponent controls and you break it.
So I like this card just because of how you have to play when you see this card. So a lot of the times your strategy against lightning is you want to play something, you want to attack right away, you don't want your cards to be active. Well, this card now says you probably want one card to be blocking because if you're in that race to deal damage, you're going to lose all your forwards. So now that Twilight Odin's there, now you're thinking, I have to have a blocker, which means now I can all Sid you. And like you said, he's a 13 character, so works well with Opus 4 Lightning. So I think this card definitely can see play. Mono Lightning would love it, and then other decks it could see use in certain matchups, like when you're up against like Wind or you're up against like big cards with Brave that they'll never really get to be active. You may not play this as much, but it definitely has a spot.
Yeah, I think this is really a mono lightning only card for the most part. But I think it does shine in there enough to warrant a slot. I think it really helps you against water decks currently. For them, like it can be scary. Like this card is scary for them to face because it can't really interact with it until it becomes a monster. Probably also good against ice as well. And then again, like you said, you play this guy, you force him to play a blocker to keep up, which then allows you to outsid, which is also really good. So yeah, I think this guy definitely sees play 100%. So the next card is another backup. It's a 2-cost Scholar, standard unit. Tap, put him in the break zone, choose 2 active forwards opponent controls, and deal him 3,000 damage.
I like this card more than Red Mage, but I think just on that note, I think this card is more useful in two color decks than a mono deck just because it's very cheap, two cost. You just break itself and then you can deal things 3,000 damage, which then addition to that, and then with a couple other maybe fire cards or some AoE effects can probably clear a board of whatever those two things it targeted. In Mono Lightning, I don't see it as much just because there's already a bunch of really good two drops, as well as there's another two drop that we're going to cover later that I think is an Insta Splash in Mono Lightning.
Yeah, I think this gets overshadowed by that card for sure, as well as some other previous 2 cost stuff. Um, so yeah, I think like you said, in other like Lightning X decks, this could see play just because it's just a break effect basically. It's not terrible, and it is a 2 cost, so it could see some play, but I don't think it really makes the cut in Mono Lightning, in my opinion. But it's not awful.
No,
Next
definitely more
card,
playable.
yeah, next card we have is Sid of Clan Gully. So this guy costs 3, he's a backup, and he tutors for Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced 2 card.
It's a tutor. You can get Alola, you can get loose Adele, other cards. It's good if you play Tactics Advanced 2 cards. Even in Mono Lightning, you probably grabbing a second copy of Alua for that S ability, or if you just need one, it's a good card.
Yep.
Don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this. Basically, that's it. Yeah, you're using this to get a little most of the time, and when Lightning, you're using this to get a little Adele, Luso, basically. Um, yeah, it costs good. It costs right around what all the other ones cost, and it does what it wants to do. Definitely will see play for sure. Next up, we have Kalia Cheval. It's a 4 cost backup. When he enters the field, you can search for 1 job, a Gito Cadet, and add it to your hand.
This card is bad. And why it's bad is one, you just said Sit of Clan Gully costs 3 for its effect. This is a cost 4 effect, and it can only grab 5 cards, which you've already reviewed the fire cards, which a lot of times I believe was said one was and the other, the ninja who dealt 1k was okay, but you're like, you don't know if it really merits running. And then the other two that backups it searches that we'll cover later kind of the same thing that we'll go over. I think one is playable and the other is not playable. But even then, to pay 4 just for this guy, just to grab something else, I don't think you play this card at all.
Yeah, I don't think he's very good either. I think the reason that he's costed at 4, like their reasoning for it, is he can get backups, and generally, if you can get backups, they usually put you over like 1 more CP up instead of the 3. But I think if this guy was 3, it would make me want to play it more. At 4, I don't think this sees play at all, and I don't think there's enough Agito cadets to really warrant anything currently that I can think of. So I don't know. And then we also have another card that searches for backups that's later in this review that also costs 3. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Uh, so next card we have is Quan. It's a 2 cost backup Agito cadet. When it enters the field, you may cast 1 summon, cost 2 or less from your hand without paying its cost.
All right. It's a 2 drop, but at the same time, you have you have to you have to play a summon from your hand that's 2 or less. If you're playing strictly, you're not going to see this card in Mono Lightning because Mono Lightning, the only card it has is Ramu that's undersized. And then if you're playing it in other types of decks like cadets, well, yes, I guess that means you have access to Alexander and then Ifrit as well. It's just there's just better two drops to play. Like there's not enough of a package that would merit running this right now.
Yeah, I think the best thing to see play is a card that just got released in the set, and that's Bismarck, maybe. But even then, like then now you have to play this card to even do that. Just you could just play Bismarck without it. It's not like you need this card to play Bismarck.
Yeah, because it's 2 or less. Like you said, it's very easy to get the value of that card just by playing a card. Like, and it specifically says print and cost of 2, so other effects such as Una wouldn't allow you to play like a Leviathan or stuff like that. It has to be Bismarck.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, this card is kind of interesting because I don't think anything quite does this right now, but I don't think it's going to see much play, honestly. So next card we have is Black Knight. It's another monster. Costs 2. When a forward of your opponent controls, or when a forward of cost 4 or less enters the field of your opponent, put this in the break zone, and if you do, break that forward.
So another one of those effects that you don't get to control, but it just forces an awkward spot. I like this card a lot. It's just because 4 less is probably hitting a lot of things, and then it only costs 2. So if you're breaking a 4 drop with it, the value of it has already been seen. It kind of helps put pressure on your opponent to the point that either they're going to be fishing for a card who has like an ETB that they want, like Win Zidane, or either they're going to be fishing for a second copy of a card they want to play because they know what's coming in is going to be broken. Like I could definitely see as the meta evolves, this guy being a part of it. I don't know if you play him immediately, but I definitely think he's more to look at, and I could see him being played.
Yeah, I think he's pretty good. He, like you say, he hits the magic number basically, which is 4. He only costs 2, which is nice. He's force trigger, which kind of sucks, but he's still really awkward to play around. There are some stuff that plays around him very well. I think he's the best of these type of cards, like this. I'm gonna break when something happens and do something. I think he's the best, and I think he definitely warrants a look at for sure in a lot of decks. Like if you're running lightning. So next up we have the 4-cost Thancred. He's a Scion. If you control a Scion other than Thancred, he gains 1,000 power, and if he receives damage while dull, the damage is reduced by 2,000 instead, and he's printed 8k.
All right. Let's put the disclaimer out right now. If you're running Scions, you run 3 of them without question. But other than that, okay, so he gains 1K for Scions, which probably makes he's going to be a 9K most of the time. He's probably not going to be too much bigger than that because Scions don't have a way to buff their job, and you don't really run this in you don't run like Lulu in Scions just because he's really their only attacker that's lightning. The rest of their cards are like Earth that has their forwards, so he's just gonna be a 9K, and then when he swings, because when he receives damage while dull, he'll probably not lose combat. It's okay. It You definitely wouldn't put it into other non-Scion decks just because there's other really good 4 drops right now, including probably the next card we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing about the Lightning Scions, and also this guy does count backup, so as long as you have a backup, he has that plus 1,000 power. Is I think that the Lightning Scions are pretty playable outside of a Scion deck in general. So I could see a deck where you play this guy and you play the new backup Scions, or just one of them maybe, and you play the one that tutors the other two. And I think that this guy it makes this guy pretty strong. And just a 4-cost 8k that reduces damage by 2,000 while he's attacking seems okay. It reminds me a lot of like Light Warrior Light almost, but more selfish, I guess.
Hmm.
So this guy's interesting. I think he could see play maybe if, but again, I think the amount of lightning is just so tight that I don't know if taking those backups out for the Scion backups to jam this guy in is worth it. Like I feel like I'd rather have the other cards maybe.
Yeah, it's like it comes down to certain packages do you want to run. Like you could run the Scion package in this, which we'll probably talk a little bit more once we get to the backups, or you can continue with the Opus 4 Nashu Hildebrand package
Yeah.
that you can splash. So you'll see what becomes developed, but it's just hard to merit it right now.
Yeah. And then next up we have the first legendary, I think. Yeah, I think that's the first legendary we talked about.
Yep.
4 cost Zemus, he's AK. For X, colorless and tap, choose one lightning forward in your break zone. If it costs is X, play it onto the field. You can only use this ability during your turn.
So once you get over the fact that this card is kind of slow, you realize the more turns this card survives, the bigger a problem this card has become. Because once this gets to get going, the fact that I could grab a Mons, all Sid, I can play cards and I know I can pitch it just because I have access to it again. And a lot of those ETB triggers will swing a game. Like you are constantly in a deficit to deal with him. Yes, because he has a tap ability, you're probably not going to activate him on the first turn. And you're probably not going to give him haste too, just because you'd be paying 4 to play Zemus. You'd probably paying 2 to give him haste with Red Mage. And then you'd be giving more mana just to play something. So that's already expensive, so that's probably not going to see play much. But otherwise, once he survives, he's he's really good.
Yeah, I think this guy's you jam this guy mono lighting immediately. He's not as good outside of mono lighting because he gets less targets, because his target has to be a lightning forward. But in mono lighting, I think this guy's a monster. He's like basically you slam him down, and they have to deal with him in the first couple turns. And like you said, now you can like pitch Alcids early and stuff, and you slam this guy down, and now you have to deal with him, or you know an Alcid's coming, basically. Bringing back Amon can be a blowout. Bringing back Opus for lightning can be a blowout. There's just so many things this guy can do.
Yeah.
That's insane. So
Just to add one point, I think he isn't terrible in a splash of two other elements in wind or earth. I don't think he's terrible just because I think at least those type of elements have cards that will allow him to live longer. And then also an ability like this to give him brave as well to be able to swing and then use that ability could put him over the top. But like you said, less targets. But I think mono lightning instant 2 or 3 of, I think you can find room in hybrid decks as well if you can keep them out.
something I just thought of actually just right now. What about this guy in Golbez? Like, is that bad? I feel like that's not bad. Maybe it's too greedy. I don't know.
It might be kind of greedy, but at the same time, you could try it. Like, I think I mean, it's hard because Golbez is going to be running Gilgameshes, so you're not cutting that spot. Amon, you're probably not cutting either, but if you want to be cute and try one of them just once that Golbez is out, I could it'd be nasty if it hit.
Yeah, because I mean, you can bring back the Golbez's, the Amons, and the Gilgameshes, which can be pretty good. But I mean, I'm not sure. I think it might be too greedy, but it's just something I just thought about, which is interesting to me.
Thank God this card is only during the main phase. Otherwise, it'd be broken.
Yeah, that's true. So next up we have 2-cost Destin. He's a backup. Costs required to play Clady, Tryon, and Yeju. I guess that's how you say it. Is reduced by 1, cannot become 0.
So if you're running knights, you definitely run this card because the other cards are definitely viable. In fact, shameless plug, RVA Returners recently did a battle arena that featured knights. Go watch it.
Yeah, it might not be up by the time of this video, but it will be up pretty soon after.
All right.
So, but yeah, I think this guy is pretty good because the 2 cards he hits are playable in knights, and he goes in that one deck. Outside of that deck, I'm not sure he's really that good. It is interesting that I think this is the first guy that references a card that hasn't been printed yet, which is the last guy, Pieju.
Would you know what that card would have done in the chapter series? Because I do not know.
I have no idea, and I'm not familiar enough with Final Fantasy XI to kind of even guess, but I'd have to look it up. I would assume he's some kind of knight or prince, would be my guess. He might be a prince. That would be my guess, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, yeah, he's playable in that one deck, but I think that deck is good. So next up we have another monster, 2-cost Bunker Beast. Tap, choose one blocking forward, it loses 2,000 power until end of turn, and he's a 13 character.
That last part is one of the biggest things about this character. It is a 13 monster that stays out, that is not like Yaomin who breaks himself, and then you're not forced to playing McQuee as a backup to be able to trigger lightning. And then also, once this guy is out, we know the theme of lightning. Most of the time, you're stuck party attacking to deal damage. Like, now I can almost kind of swing with my single character, and then if you choose to block, I may trade, or best case, even may win with this guy. Like, I like him. I definitely want to try 2 copies to see how it runs right now. You may disagree with me. I don't know.
No, I don't disagree. I like this card a lot, actually. For pretty much the same reasons you said. Like, your guys are generally small, like Alcid. This basically makes Alcid an 8K if you think about it. And then with Lulu, he's a 9K, kind of. I mean, not really, but I'm saying, like, technically speaking.
Yes.
As long as you could target the thing that's blocking Alcid. And he's a 13 character, which just makes Lightning even better. So yeah, I think this card's really good. I think it's good as like a 1 or 2 of in mono Lightning decks, and maybe even outside of that too. Possibly like Wind Lightning. But I like this card a lot. Next card we have is the 4-cost Tryon. The Job Knight, other than Tryon, you control, gains plus 1,000 power, and he's an 8k.
So he's a knight. He buffs other knights while he's out. Because he's a job knight, he can be tutored by the Duke, as well as, I think he's just another thing that helps water lightning knights, or if for some reason you still want to splash earth to make it tricolor, it's kind of janky, but it's still, he buffs all of them, as well as makes the conditions to play a card that we'll talk about that much easier.
Yep, I think this card's good at what it does, but it really only does one thing, but that one thing that it does is good, and I think that deck is viable now, so I think this will definitely see play in that deck. Outside of that deck, kind of like the Destin thing, pretty much. This guy's exactly like that. In the deck that he's in, he's good. So he'll see play in that deck. Next up, we have Nagi, another Agito Cadet. 2-cost backup, tap, choose a blocking forward. Choose a blocking 0 Cadet forward, excuse me. It loses 1,000 power until end of turn. Or choose a forward blocking. I keep talking over myself. Choose one forward blocking an Agito Cadet. It loses 1,000 power.
So, of all the Lightning Type 0 cards, I like this card a lot. So, its only problem is that it's Lightning element. And a lot of the Cadet decks that you see right now, with the release of those fire cards, the Vermilion Lassie, and some of those, you're probably running Fire Wind Cadets, which means this doesn't really have a spot in that. But if you're choosing to run either Wind Lightning Cadets or even 3-color of specifically the Job Cadets, you definitely put this card in it.
Yeah, I can see that. Again, I think it's another one of the scenarios where, like, outside of that, it's just not good, like, at all. But,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you're playing that deck, you definitely probably slam this in because it's a playable 2-cost backup, for sure. So next card we have is the 2-cost Ravager, another Tactics Advanced 2 guy. For 1 lightning tap, choose an active forward, deal 4,000 damage, and it's a 5k power.
I mean, on paper it doesn't look bad until you think about it, and then you think it's actually kind of bad because one, it has a tap ability, meaning you don't get to do it right away. But that also means you could do it multiple times. But it's a 2-drop, which are very easy to break. It's 5k, which is also very easy to break. And then it's just not, it doesn't really help what Lightning wants to do unless you're another deck who's just specifically trying to break and then do something after. I don't really see this card seeing much play.
Yeah, I think this card's pretty bad, honestly. I think there's not much to think about. Like, even in Wind Lightning, where it might want to do those pingy type effects, there's other things that just do it better. You never want to search this out with Sid or Luso, really. And I don't even think you want to put this in your deck to take up a slot. So I think it's just pretty bad. I don't think it sees play at all.
Yep.
So next card, 2-cost Cannoneer. He's a backup, also a Tactics Advanced 2 guy. For 1 lightning tap, put him in the break zone. Choose 1 blocking forward. It loses 3,000 power until end of turn.
This is the card that now is a 2-drop backup that you find room for. The fact that it is only 1-cost lightning and break, and then something else that will allow it. It's power reduction for one, which is better than damage, and then also it will allow you to win combat because the theme of lightning, your things are undersized, you're swinging. This guy will probably break in combat what it targeted, and it's breakable, which allows you to play your other lightning backups, or if you want to play another copy of this. Like, I love this card, and the fact that in this state right now, although it has to be blocking, I think I would personally run this card over Opus 2 Black Mage right now.
Yeah, I think this card is bonkers. The problem with Opus 2 Black Mage is you had to use it, like, the turn it came out, that was it. It was done. This, you just play first turn. It doesn't feel bad. And then you get to use it whenever you want, even though it's more limited to blocking only. Yeah, I think this card's really, really good. I think it's just auto staple now in Lightning. And probably not even just mono Lightning, probably Lightning, whatever you're playing. Because I think it's that good. Also, it has that Tactics Advance 2 label, which means, like, Luso hits it and stuff like that. Yeah, I think this card's really, really good. It'll 100% see play. Next up, we have the 2-cost Dark Knight. He's a 4k power. For 1 lightning, deal 1,000 damage to all forward opponent controls and 2,000 damage to Dark Knight.
I'm just gonna say, why are you playing this card? Please just don't do that. When you think standard units, you don't think lightning. Although the one cute effect is the fact that it deals damage to everything, and you could stack that multiple times. So hey, tap all 5 of your backups and pitch 5 cards in your hand. You effectively nuke the field. I can't do this anymore. This card's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. It's too expensive to do. Like, it's cool that you can do that, but it's just too expensive to do it. So yeah, this card doesn't see any play. It's just a bad card, I think. So yeah, we'll move on to the next one. Next up, we have the new lightning, 2 cost haste. At the end of return lightning to its owner's hand, and it's 5,000 power.
Remember, lightning is Bay, but this card is not. I think this card is terrible. So the problem with it is you almost never want to play it. So while okay, turn 1 you could play it and then it has haste and then it goes back to your hand. The thing is, in the beginning of games, you want to be building your backups. You don't want to play this. Late games, you probably want to drop 5 card 5 drop lightning or something else instead. Or even for a late game swing, you would drop a 4 drop lightning to indulge something and then swing. Like the problem with this card is because while you think it's cool that it would return to your hand so they can't really deal with it, it's just always a negative, it feels like, most of the time when you play this card. The only remote scenario I could see is if you wanted to plug it into Golbez and then you pitched your whole hand and then you bring this out so you have 1 more card in hand, which then if you draw 2, you could play a Gilgamesh or something. But other than that, I really wanted to like this card, but I think this card sucks.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on to that. I think it's very narrow in what it does, and it's not even really that great. Um, it has haste, which I guess is okay, and it's on curve for that, which is good too. But it has to bounce every turn. The redeeming factors, like you said, are basically in a Golbez deck, bouncing back and being able to pay for Gilgamesh or Golbez because you not really have backups in that deck. Other than that, she's just fodder for other lightning special abilities, which there's other lightnings that probably are just better as slots in your deck. Yeah, I don't think this sees much play at all. And yeah, it's pretty bad. Like if I had to rate it, I'd probably say it's bad. Next up, we have the new Ramuh. Cost 1 EX burst, choose 1 damage forward, deal it 7,000 damage.
So you see 7,000 damage and you see EX burst and you see 1 drop and you go, hey, this card's probably good. Nah. It's specifically because, all right, scenarios, it's very probably decent in a Wind Lightning deck once you've already done damage to something. But like, if you hit this on an EX burst, most of the time when you're hitting an EX burst, you probably allowed your opponent to swing through, which then at that point they haven't taken damage. It's the fact that because it has to already be damaged for it to trigger, it kind of it's on paper it seems fine, but just in practical scenarios, there's just other things I would rather have. And then also that earlier talk when we talked about Odin, there's just other summons I'd rather be playing.
Yep, totally agree with that. I think this really only can possibly see play and Wind Lightning with like Cactuar. Really it, because then you get like a 2 mana 8K basically, which sounds really good. But like you said, the EX burst isn't great normally because normally you're letting the damage through anyways. So
And then
yeah, go ahead.
with Wind Lightning, just to add on to that, with Cactar, I'd probably rather play Barbarisha or Alandu because at least I get a 4th that stays out after.
That's true. Yep, very true. Yeah, I mean, it might be redundant in that deck. Yeah, for sure. Because I think with their summons, you would rather have like Odin's stuff to just straight out break your problem cards instead of, because dealing damage isn't the problem that deck has. So yeah, it might just be too redundant in that deck. So yeah, it probably just doesn't see play at all. So next up, we have the second legendary for Lightning, which is the 6-drop Ramza. The 6-drop is kind of misleading, to be honest. So the cost required to play Ramza onto the field is reduced by 1 for each forward you control. It cannot become 0. For each forward other than Ramza you control, Ramza gains plus 1,000 power. And if Ramza has 10,000 power, he gains haste. And whenever he attacks, choose 1 forward, cost 3 or less. Your opponent controls, break it. And he's a base 6k.
So if you want to talk about why Knights are suddenly viable, the boss has game. Like first you're like, man, Ramza has another legendary. But then you look, like you said, it was like, this legendary is actually really good. So between cards like Ovelia, Triton, and then just the fact that you're probably going to have multiple knights, you're probably never playing 6 for him ever. You're probably going to be playing 3 or 2. And then other scenarios, even if you want to splash him in other decks, Golbez, after you duked your Golbez and then you have 4 forwards, now he's just a 2-drop that he has 10k, has haste, and then he breaks 3 drops or less when he swings. He's something that you have to get rid of once he's on the board. And in the right decks around him, he just wins games or just no. No, that's it. He probably just wins games.
Yeah, like you said, you have to immediately deal with this guy. When this guy works, he works. Like that's the best way I can explain it. Like in a deck that allows him to function, this guy's busted. But that's not like every deck. You can't just like slam this guy in every deck. But if a deck works around this guy, he's gonna come in like real hot, and he's gonna do a lot of damage unless you have an immediate answer to him. And because he costs 6, there's not a whole lot of stuff that hits that right now. Like maybe Earth has like the best ways to deal with him currently, or like Water, I guess, to bump him or like
Yeah.
reduce his power. But like, yeah, I mean, I think this guy is really good, and when the deck works around him, he's insane. So next up, we have the new Dragoon of the set. He's a 3-cost Dragoon, 7k. For 1 lightning, he gains first strike and no end of turn.
I mean, I'm not gonna say much. If you run Dragoons, he's an on-curve Dragoon who can have first strike. That's cool. You probably put him in. You've ran Dragoons more than me, so I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it.
He's probably better than the last Opus 4 Dragoon that just gained like plus 2,000 power, because he can only use that ability once. At least this guy's like on curve, still gets all the buffs, and can gain something else like first strike. But if you're playing like Water with like the Warrior of Light and stuff that's good in first strike anyways, it might be a little redundant. But yeah, I mean, I think he's fine in the Dragoon deck. Outside of that, he's not going to see any play for sure. So, and Dragoons is still kind of a fun Z deck. It's not quite competitive enough. So next up, I think this is the last of the main set cards, is Luis Swa. He's a 3-cost backup. When he enters the field, you can search for 1 card named Alice or 1 card named Alpha and add it to your hand.
So he grabs an Alice or an Alphanod, which are 2 backups, which we'll discuss later. But one's a 4-drop or could be a 3-drop, and the other is a 2-drop. So if you're looking to fast ramp to start, you could play this, and then you already have your next card you can play right away. So that kind of feels good. I understand some people who don't know the story of 14 complain, why is he not a Scion? Well, the lore says that, but if he was a Scion, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think for what he does, he's good. He's a 3-cost that tutors out a backup that lets you ramp, and Lightning likes to ramp, so I think there's merit to thinking about this in your deck. Like you go like turn 1 2 costs, turn 2 this guy, search your 2-drop backup, play your 2-drop backup. Now you're already at 3 backups. That sounds really good for like Adia. She wants to ramp up really quick so that she can break things. So I think it's good. Next card we have is the 4-cost Alice. If you control card named Alphino, the cost of her is reduced by 1. The job Scion of 7th Dawn Forge you control gain haste.
So it is a Scion backup, so if you're running a Scion deck, you probably put in 1 or 2. It's just that most of the time, the Scions themselves are pretty weak, or you're not, except for Thancred and a buff Yida, you don't really care about the haste one as much. So, and then from there, you're still looking at a 3-drop or a 4-drop who doesn't really do anything else. So, like I said, even in Scion, I don't think it's that good, but because there's not enough Scions, you probably run one.
Yeah, I think she's kind of whatever. Like, and Scions aren't very good, which I think is what makes her seem even worse. And she's overshadowed by her brother, who we're gonna get to next. So yeah, I don't think she sees much play. So next up, we have 2-cost Alphino. He's another Scion. For 1 lightning, tap, choose an active forward, deal 1,000 damage. If you control a job Scion 7th on forward, deal it 2,000 instead.
So, for Scions, instant immediately add because it is a 2-drop that helps you ramp, and then he can deal 1k to something when it's going to be blocking. Like you alluded to earlier, even in Mono Lightning, if you play him turn 2, you now have three backups or two backups, and you have something that can always deal 1k damage because you have Louis Swab, which then you can now use other cards such as Opus 1 Black Mage because I dealt damage to something. I can break it now. I can play Orlando or other things. So you could. I think this card's good.
Yeah, I think when you pair this with Louis Suarez, it's definitely a good card that lets you ramp. It combos well with like Orlando and other things like that, and Adia. I think mainly right now I'm looking at playing this in mono lightning, and that's why I said earlier that there might be merit to playing Thancred, just because if you're running these two, Thancred is pretty valuable, just because he's a big body. At that point, because he gets that buff. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it might be hard to find spots for this, but if you can find spots for it, I don't think it's bad. So next up we have the last card, which is 2-cost Urion J. He's another Scion at 2k power, which is really undersized. And when he enters the field, choose one monster in your break zone. If it costs equal to or less than the number of Scions you control, play it onto the field.
All right, so man, that 2k power, like, jeez, that's so bad. If only he had like a secondary ability of like he gained power equal to like monster, just something, because that's really underwhelming. But okay, just the actual effect now. It's an ETB that when you get to choose a monster, which now that means with Scions you're kind of forcing yourself to play monsters. But because he is a Scion himself, you can always grab a 1-drop. Ideally, you may want to grab 2-drop. Luckily, if you get to a 4-drop, you may want to grab a monster like that. But I think you're already turning a deck whose main goal is just to flood with Scions that much more other stuff that just makes them awkward.
Yeah, I think he just kind of like goes the other way. Like he doesn't really support what they want to do. The Scions feel a little bit all over the place, except for like they have like a couple cards in there, like like Alpha Note, Alice, Louis Suave kind of work together. And Feely's the only one that kind of has that general theme. Papalymo and Yida are doing like their own thing. Urion J is doing his own thing. Anchor is just a big guy. Like they seem all over the place, and I think that's kind of what's holding them back is they don't really know what they want to be doing. Um,
Uh,
yeah, so I don't think this guy sees much play. But if he can hit like a 3-cost monster like a behemoth or something, that could feel pretty good.
yeah, but at this, yeah, but then I'm playing this card and I'm playing Scions.
Yeah, that's the problem. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he sees much play at all for sure. Yeah, so that's all the cards we have today. Look forward to our next set review, which I think is Water. If you disagree with what we're saying, remember just put it in the comments. Just let us know what you think of the cards. Remember, like, favorite, subscribe, all that jazz. Look at us. Look at our podcasts on our SoundCloud and our website. And see you guys later. Peace.
Later, you all.